My name is Eli Whitman, 38 years old from Riverview, Wyoming. They mocked me, ignored me, and called me the black sheep of the Whitman family. While my brothers flaunted their success in Riverview, Wyoming, I vanished, with nothing but a duffel bag and a plan. 15 years later, their empire is crumbling. And they're begging the forgotten son for mercy. But I didn't come back for revenge. I came back to show them who I became when no one was watching. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe for more true story narrations filled with betrayal, revenge, and redemption, like if you've ever been underestimated and proved everyone wrong. Now, let's begin the story of how the forgotten son became the one they could never outrun. I wasn't raised to be quiet. I just learned it early, in Riverview, Wyoming, a small suburban pocket where everyone knows your last name before you say it. My last name, Whitman, came with expectations. But not for me. No, those were reserved for my older brothers. Chase was the golden child. Quarterback. Class president. Financial prodigy. If he so much as sneezed in public, someone handed him a tissue with a scholarship wrapped inside. Garrett was the charmer. Rodeo king, real estate wunderkind by 25. Married the mayor's daughter. He could sell sand in a desert and be thanked for it. And then there was me, Eli. The youngest. The one who fixed the porch steps when no one asked. Helped mom unload groceries, and quietly disappeared during family barbecues without anyone noticing. I didn't have a title in our household. No spotlight. Just expectations to stay out of the way while the real success stories unfolded. At dinner, Chase would talk numbers and deals. Garrett would boast about new listings and land flips. I'd mention I'd fixed the fence line or tuned up Dad's old tractor, and they'd nod like I'd spoken in a foreign language. It wasn't cruelty. It was indifference. And somehow, that hurt worse. I'd sit on the porch late into the night sometimes, watching the stars fade behind our neighbors' porch lights, wondering if I was invisible to them, or if they had simply decided I wasn't worth seeing. Our father, Clint Whitman, treated life like a business. If you couldn't show profit, you weren't worth investing in. Chase and Garrett were investments. I was overhead, Mom. Lorraine Whitman floated through the house like a ghost in pearls. Polite. Controlled. Supportive, in theory. But always more impressed with Chase's sales pitch or Garrett's Instagram-worthy wedding than anything I ever did. I remember my high school graduation, not because it was special, but because it wasn't. My name was called. I walked across the stage. My family clapped politely. But the loudest cheers came for Chase, who'd just landed a job at a top finance firm. They talked more about his LinkedIn profile than my diploma. By the time I turned 18, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to try harder for scraps of attention. I wasn't going to beg to be noticed in a house where noise passed for worth. I packed a bag, grabbed my grandfather's old watch, the only thing that ever felt like it truly belonged to me, and left before dawn. No hugs. No one chasing after me. No one even noticed I was gone until days later, but I didn't leave angry. I left with purpose. They could have the spotlight. The trophies. The town's approval. I'd take the silence, and build something inside it, something they would never see coming. I hit the highway before the sun rose, my duffel bag tossed in the back of a rusted-out Chevy I bought from a neighbor for $600 and a promise. The road out of Riverview was long and flat, lined with cattle fences and forgotten barns. As the town shrank in my rearview mirror, I felt something strange, something close to freedom. No one called. No one asked where I'd gone. Not even a text from Chase, Garrett, or Mom. It was as if I'd simply evaporated, so I became what they treated me as, a ghost. I drifted through small towns, Sheridan, Rock Springs, Buffalo. Places people pass through, not settle in. I'd take odd jobs wherever I could. Welding in Thermopolis. Roofing houses in Douglas. Shoveling snow off roads in Laramie during brutal winters. I slept in my truck, in motels, in bunkhouses. I worked with my hands, kept my head down, and listened. Everywhere I went, I paid attention, not just to the work, but to the people who weren't working. The ones who owned the land, sat in diners with ranchers tipping their hats at them. The lawyers who came through with clean boots and coffee orders longer than their workday. The men with quiet power, who didn't boast, they signed checks. One thing became clear: Wyoming doesn't wear wealth like the cities do. Here, it's quieter, older, wrapped in land deeds and handshake deals. Ranches passed down through generations. Oil plots managed behind closed doors. It wasn't about cash, it was about control, and that fascinated me. While Garrett was flashing his real estate signs all over the counties, and Chase was playing hotshot banker back in Riverview, I was learning the true currency of this state: land. Ownership. Patience. I watched how land changed hands. Sometimes it was through estate sales when families couldn't keep up with taxes. Other times it was divorce, death, or desperation. The landowners with real money rarely bought from each other. No, they waited until someone cracked, and then they swooped in. I took notes. I kept a ledger in a battered notebook. Wrote down sale prices, land sizes, ownership histories. I learned how to read the county records, how to talk to title clerks without raising eyebrows. I didn't know exactly what I was building, but I knew what I wasn't going to be. I wasn't going to beg for approval from the Whitmans. I wasn't going to be another forgotten name. I was going to build something they wouldn't see coming until it was too late, and I would do it like the landowners I studied, quietly. Strategically, in the wind. I bought my first parcel of land at 22. 5 acres outside Wheatland, half-flooded during spring and thick with cottonwood and sage. The county had labeled it non-essential, the kind of property people ignored unless they needed to dump scrap metal. It cost me less than a used ATV, and it changed everything. I signed the deed under a name I created just for that moment: Stone Ridge Holdings. It sounded bigger than me, more permanent. Like something that couldn't be overlooked. No one knew it was mine. Not Chase, not Garrett, not even Rayanne. That was the point. While my brothers posted about luxury SUVs and closing another deal for the Whitman name, I stayed silent. I poured every paycheck into land auctions, back taxes, and distressed properties. I wasn't buying prime real estate, I was buying forgotten land. The kind people assumed had no value until a developer wanted it, or water rights changed, or the oil companies poked around again. The second property came 6 months later, 8 acres along a dry creek in Converse County. Then a cabin lot near Alcova Lake. By 25, Stone Ridge Holdings owned nearly 30 acres scattered across 3 counties. Not much by rancher standards, but I wasn't trying to be a rancher, I was trying to be invisible and inevitable. The beauty of land is that it doesn't ask for attention. It waits. It appreciates in silence. And when people finally need it, the price is whatever you say it is. Meanwhile, my family back in Riverview continued the show. Garrett threw a massive housewarming party for his new home, 4,200 square feet, granite everything, and a guest bathroom with a Bluetooth speaker built into the mirror. Chase launched a podcast about financial freedom and wore suits tailored tighter than his personality. Dad? He bragged about his boys to every local business owner, conveniently forgetting I existed. I watched from afar, sipping gas station coffee, sitting on dirt I now legally owned. They laughed at the kind of land I bought. I knew they would. My brothers only saw value in curb appeal and closing costs. They had no idea how to look past overgrown brush or dry soil and see opportunity. They were loud. I stayed quiet, but every month, I added something. A metal shed here. A gravel road there. I learned how to negotiate material prices, how to file permits without drawing attention. I talked to the old-timers who knew where the wells ran and what land held secrets beneath the surface. And I kept everything in the name of Stone Ridge. Eventually, I owned parcels near 2 towns, 5 rental-ready cabins, and 1 stretch of ridgeline that overlooked the very land my father once bragged about keeping in the family. I wasn't building for them, I was building so they'd never see me coming. until it was far too late. I hadn't heard from Rayanne in almost 5 years. She was one of the few people in Riverview who treated me like a person, not a placeholder. We used to sit on the hood of her old Jeep and talk about what we'd do if we ever got out of Wyoming. I left. She stayed. But she never forgot me, so when her name popped up on my phone one quiet Tuesday morning, I picked up. "Eli," she said, her voice tight. "You sitting down?" I was standing on one of my parcels near Glenrock, watching a contractor pour foundation for a new rental cabin. The wind carried the scent of pine and freshly turned soil. "Go ahead," I said, "it's your dad. And your brothers. Things are bad. Financially." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "Chase got into some legal mess with client funds," she continued. "And Garrett's been trying to cover it up, selling off properties, shuffling accounts. I overheard Mom talking to Lorraine at the market. They're desperate, Eli. Your dad's even considering selling part of Ridge Hill." That stopped me cold. Ridge Hill, that land had been in our family for generations, sure, but not anymore. I'd bought it 3 years ago, through a quiet auction after Dad took out a high-interest loan against it and failed to pay the balloon payment. It was one of the few parcels I kept under my personal trust instead of Stone Ridge. I wanted that one close. "They're planning to sell Ridge Hill?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Rayanne lowered her voice. "Yeah. Garrett's telling everyone he's got a private buyer lined up. I thought you should know, in case. Well, in case you wanted to stop them." I laughed quietly. "They can't sell what they don't own." Silence, then Rayanne exhaled. "You bought it, didn't you? 3 years ago." "Damn," she whispered, and I could hear the grin in her voice. "They have no idea." "No," I said, stepping back from the build site and staring out over the land I'd turned from dust into something solid. "They really don't. The Whitmans had always assumed everything they touched was theirs by birthright. Land. Money. Legacy. They never imagined anyone, especially me, would be smart enough to take it right from under them. But desperation makes people sloppy. It makes them start counting chips that aren't on the table, and now, it was clear, they were counting my land. That call from Rayanne wasn't just a heads-up. It was a warning shot. The Whitmans weren't just falling, they were reaching for lifelines, and they were about to realize the rope they thought would save them led straight to the one person they'd thrown away, me, the forgotten son, the ghost, the landowner, and I was done being quiet. The envelope came on a Thursday, tucked between a hardware invoice and a tax notice. Heavy cardstock, fancy gold lettering. Whitman family reunion, come home to where it all began. Like they'd forgotten I'd already left for good. It wasn't sentiment. It was strategy. I knew desperation when I saw it. After Rayanne's call, this invitation wasn't a gesture, it was bait. Garrett and Chase were drowning, and they needed a lifeline. And in their minds, if they could get me back under their roof, they could control the narrative. So I said yes, not because I wanted to reconnect, because I wanted to see their faces when they realized the narrative had already shifted. I drove the same old truck, wore my usual work boots, and kept my coat dusty. Let them think I was still the same Eli who fixed fences and walked out without a fight. The Whitman house hadn't changed much, white siding, the same eagle-shaped wind chime clinking above the porch. But the lawn looked tired, the shutters dull, like the weight of the years was finally showing. Garrett answered the door. His smile was too wide, his eyes too tired. "Eli," he said, pulling me in for a hug he hadn't earned. "Glad you came." The living room was filled with forced laughter and the scent of cheap cologne. Lorraine handed me a plate. Chase gave a half-hearted nod from across the room. Dad sat by the fireplace, silent, his jaw working like he was chewing on pride. After a few minutes of small talk, Garrett stood and tapped his glass. "We're really glad to have everyone here," he said, clinking ice around like a motivational speaker. "And we wanted to share some ideas. About the future of the Whitman land. There it was, Chase took over. We're exploring a potential buyer for Ridge Hill and part of the northern parcels, just enough to ease some short-term pressure. I leaned back in my chair, then took a slow sip of my drink. Short-term pressure, I echoed. Interesting. Chase smirked. You've been away a while, Eli. We've made some pretty big moves. But family is stronger when we work together. I looked around the room, their hopeful, calculating eyes, then I reached into my coat and pulled out a folder. I placed it on the table and opened it slowly, letting the pages fan out like a quiet storm. Tax records. Deed copies. Ownership maps. Their smiles vanished. Ridge Hill, I said, tapping the first page. Bought in 2020. At auction. North pasture. Acquired last year. And the old mill lot? Bought it out from under the lien Garrett put on it. Silence. Lorraine's face drained of color. Chase stared like I'd spoken in code. Garrett's hand curled into a fist, then released. Dad looked up at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in years. I'm not here to make a deal, I said. I just came to see if you'd finally admit I was worth something. And with that, I stood up and walked out. This time, they didn't let me leave without feeling it. Word travels fast in a town like Riverview. 2 weeks after the reunion, I heard whispers at a feed store outside Casper. Garrett Whitman's real estate firm just laid off half its staff, followed by a snort. Guess the empire's not as solid as he made it look. I didn't say a word. Just paid for my nails and timber and left with a quiet smile. By the time October rolled in, the Whitman brothers were no longer the picture of small-town royalty. The cracks they'd been hiding for years were now gaping fractures. Too wide for even their charm to cover. Chase was the first to go down. The local bank pulled him in for internal audits. Turns out his numbers didn't add up, and hadn't for a while. He'd been fudging client portfolios to cover up massive gambling losses. Online poker. Sports betting. Even cryptocurrency schemes. All hidden under the illusion of success. When the story hit the local paper, I read it over black coffee like a man savoring every drop. Garrett tried to hold the line. He posted photos on social media, flashy houses, drone shots of ranchland he no longer owned. I knew, because I owned half of it. But image was everything to Garrett. As long as the town believed, he still had something, but you can't bluff against bankruptcy. A whistleblower from his office leaked documents showing forged signatures on land contracts. Some of them had been signed under my name. It was bold. Stupid. And poetic. I didn't need to press charges. The county took care of that. A quiet investigation turned loud when they found the forged documents tied to 2 high-profile land sales. Garrett's license was suspended. Clients fled. And his perfect home? Listed for sale within the month. Lorraine tried to shield them, like she always had. She claimed it was a misunderstanding, that the Whitman name would bounce back stronger than ever. But this time, even the church ladies stopped smiling at her in town. Their world wasn't just crumbling. It was rotting from the inside, and everyone could smell it. Meanwhile, I watched from my office in Glenrock, where Stone Ridge holdings continued to grow. No scandals. No shortcuts. Just steady, solid work. For years, they called me the forgettable one. Now I was the only one still standing. What they never understood was that real legacy isn't built on appearances. It's built on roots, deep, stubborn, and patient. While they danced in the spotlight, I laid foundations in silence, and now, as their empire collapsed in slow, shattering pieces, I didn't have to lift a finger. Their downfall wasn't my revenge, their choices were. I just gave them the time to hang themselves with the rope they thought they'd tied around me. It's a strange thing, watching the people who once looked through you finally look to you, for help, for mercy, for rescue. Stranger still when you realize they still don't see you. They see a lifeline. A last resort. A name on a deed they used to mock. Garrett's wife, Elise, packed her things in the middle of the night. Rayanne told me she drove off with their 2 kids and didn't leave a note. Not that she needed to. The foreclosure notice on their doorstep said enough. Their dream home, once featured in the local paper, was now bank-owned. Soon, someone else's. Chase wasn't so lucky. The county filed charges: fraud, wire tampering, misappropriation of client funds. He pleaded not guilty, of course. But I'd seen enough bluffers at backroom poker tables to know when someone's holding garbage. Even Lorraine, polished and proper in her pearls and seasonal scarves, began unraveling. She called Rayanne in tears, blaming Garrett's stress, Chase's bad crowd, and, eventually, me. He poisoned this family, she said. That boy's always had a bitter heart. Funny. I remembered begging her to notice me. Now I was the one they whispered about in fear, as if I'd been planning this downfall all along. But I hadn't planned anything, I'd simply waited. When the letters went out, formal eviction notices, past due tax alerts, defaulted contracts, I signed them with steady hands. Stone Ridge Holdings at the top. No return address. Just cold, clear consequences. Garrett showed up at my cabin near Alcova Lake, face sunken, eyes rimmed red. He tried to laugh it off. Come on, Eli, he said. We're brothers. This is family land. I replied. Until you leveraged it to fund a failing portfolio. He swallowed. You don't have to do this. No, I said. But I am. Chase never came to see me. He sent a lawyer instead. Thin, sharp-tongued, wearing a suit 2 sizes too expensive for the case he was fighting. He wanted to discuss a buyout. I slid the land maps across the table. Mr. Whitman, he said, frowning, you realize what you're doing will completely dismantle what remains of your family's legacy. I leaned forward, voice calm. That's the thing. It's not my family's legacy anymore. By December, Lorraine had stopped attending Sunday services. The Whitman name, once spoken with reverence in Riverview, had become the town's latest cautionary tale, and me, I said nothing publicly. I didn't brag. Didn't gloat, but each time I saw one of them struggle to keep their composure at a gas station or grocery line, I felt it, that quiet justice. They used to call me weak. Background noise. An extra shadow in their spotlight, but now they were standing in mine, and there was no one left to blame. But blood. The morning after Chase's final court hearing, I stood on the edge of the Ridge Hill Bluff, the same land my father once said should never leave the Whitman name. The sun was just cresting over the distant pines, setting the frost-tipped grass aglow. But this time, I didn't feel like the boy who left with nothing. I felt like the man who built something no one saw coming. Stone Ridge Holdings had done more than survive. It had grown, quietly, steadily, and now undeniably. But I was no longer content being a shadow in their rearview mirror. It was time to step forward, not to spite them, but to claim what I'd earned, so I rebranded. Stone Ridge Developments, not just a landholder anymore, but a builder, an employer, a name people could trust. I bought an old equipment yard outside Glenrock and turned it into our operations center. Hired local crews. Roofers. Framers. Electricians. Most of them were guys like me, kids who'd grown up on the margins, passed over for scholarships or family inheritance, left to make it work with calloused hands and stubborn hearts. We started small, renovating cabins, rebuilding forgotten lots, restoring dignity to the land people thought had no value. But we didn't stop there. By summer, we were building affordable homes near the edge of Riverview. I made sure every one of them came with modern insulation, sturdy porches, and front doors that closed without a rattle, unlike the one I grew up behind. Then came the Stone Ridge Youth Initiative, mentorship programs, trade skills workshops, weekend retreats for high schoolers who didn't want to follow the college-bound script. We gave them tools, literal and metaphorical. Showed them how to build something from nothing. Just like I had, at our first summer open house, a boy named Tyler, 16, wary, quiet, walked up to me with sawdust on his sleeves and hope in his eyes. "You really own all this?" he asked. I smiled. "Built it. Piece by piece." He looked out across the row of new homes, the scaffolding still hugging fresh frames. "They said I wasn't gonna be much. I guess you proved them wrong. Prove them wrong by living well," I told him. Not loud. Solid. The town changed, slowly. People stopped whispering my name like a ghost story and started saying it with respect. Even the diner that used to forget my order started calling my usual the Ridge breakfast. And through it all, I never once asked for the Whitman's acknowledgement. I didn't need it, because in the town where I was once the invisible son, I'd built something far more lasting than a legacy. I'd built a foundation, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just standing on solid ground, I was the one who poured it. Riverview's winter came early that year. Frost clung to the fields like dusted sugar, and the roads hissed under tires in the morning quiet. I like driving at dawn now, through the neighborhoods we built, past the lots that used to sit empty, past the very homes Garrett once called unmarketable. They weren't just livable now. They were full, of families, of warmth, of futures. It had been nearly a year since the Whitman name slipped from the front page to the footnotes. Chase had taken a plea deal, no jail time, but he'd never work finance again. Garrett moved to Cheyenne, renting a modest apartment above a strip mall insurance office. Lorraine. Well, she still lived in the old house. Alone. The shutters had faded, and the wind chime had lost its song. Funny thing about shadows, they don't just follow you. Sometimes, they define where the light can't reach, but I didn't gloat. I didn't cheer. I didn't walk past that house to rub anything in. Because in the end, it was never about revenge, it was about release. They spent their lives flaunting titles, measuring success in square footage, wine labels, and photo ops. I spent mine building things that couldn't be stolen: trust, purpose, land with roots deeper than pride. I walked through the town one afternoon, hood up, hands in pockets, just as a kid from the youth program. Marcus spotted me and ran across the street. "Mr. Whitman," he called out, breath puffing clouds in the air. "You coming by this weekend? We're almost done with that framing job." "I'll be there," I said, nodding. He grinned, then paused. "Hey. Is it true? That your brothers used to own all this?" I looked at the construction site behind him. Clean lines, strong beams, a future standing tall. "They had the name," I said. "But names fade." And that was the truth of it. The Whitmans built a legacy out of mirrors, shiny and shallow. I built mine from silence, from mistakes, from long days and frostbitten fingers. They used to call me the forgotten one. But now, even their failures lived in my shadow. I'd be lying if I said the irony wasn't satisfying. But satisfaction wasn't the same as peace. Peace came in small moments: the clang of hammers at sunrise, the smell of cedar and sawdust, the laughter of kids on job sites who finally felt seen. It came from knowing I'd done it without shortcuts, without revenge, and without needing anyone to validate the road I walked. They thought they were casting shadows with their success, but the longest shadow in Riverview now was mine, and I didn't need to raise my voice for them to feel it. I just needed to keep building. If this story struck a chord, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful true-life narrations. Have you ever been underestimated or betrayed by the people closest to you? Share your story below. Your voice matters.